November 10th, 2020, and this is 10 on Tuesdays. Today's guest is Brad Boycks, Executive Director of the Wisconsin Builders Association, and we're talking about the housing industry. What's been the impact of COVID? What does the future look like post-election? We're going to find out. I'm Holly Hoffman, founding partner and CEO of the Sales and Income Tax Advisory Network. Prior to creating my company, I worked for the Wisconsin Department of Revenue as an auditor, speaker, and sales tax specialist. My passion is to help provide sales tax education and support to tax professionals, businesses, and associations with the goal of building a network of empowered taxpayers. For more information, visit salesandincometax.com. Thank you for joining my web chats 10 on Tuesdays every Tuesday from 10 to 10:30 a.m. You can check out previous episodes on my 10 on Tuesdays channel. To find my channel, go to salesandincometax.com, look for the 10 on Tuesdays logo, click the logo to register, or click on watch previous episodes to access the 10 on Tuesday channel. And just a note, I am in the process of updating my website, so I apologize. I just am kind of reinventing. For anyone who doesn't know, in October, I purchased the 100% interest from my partners, and so I am on my own. And I'm very excited about that, and I'm going to adjust a little bit of my services, so I'm excited to share that. So beyond that, I want to welcome our guest, Brad Boycks, who's the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Builders Association. And the Wisconsin Builders Association is made up of 21 local associations, and they have about 4,000 members. It's a big organization in Wisconsin. They provide advocacy, education, and support and resources for its members, and the WBA is very active. And Brad, you played a significant role at the Builders Association. You're liaison between state government and your residential contractor members, and this spring you were really the go-to person for interpreting the rules and restrictions initially placed on contractors. So welcome, and can you share a little bit about your background and about the Wisconsin Builders Association?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Holly, for having me this morning. I appreciate it. So yes, I'm Brad Boycks. I'm the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Builders Association. I've been with the association in a number of different titles over the past 16 years. It's amazing it's been that long. But currently, like you said, I help the association, not only help to run the association, working with our member leaders and the staff that we have here, and then also a big part of my job is to kind of track what's going on with state government at the Capitol. I'm also the lead lobbyist for the association. So prior to coming to WBA, I spent 7 years as a staff member up at the state Capitol, working for one member of the state assembly and 2 members of the state Senate. My last job in the state Senate was actually working as the chief of staff for former state Senator Bob Welch, and then got the job with the Builders Association. I started off with the Builders as being the Director of Political Affairs, went on to be the Director of Government Affairs, and then 5 years ago, assuming the title of Executive Director. So it's been great. I love what I do. It's a great group of people to work for. It's a diverse number of issues, not only on the association management side, but then at the state capitol. Obviously, this year things were much different starting in March. And as you alluded to, we were really close to finishing up the legislative session. The assembly had met their final time, and we were waiting for one more day in the state Senate. They were scheduled to meet the tail part of March, and a couple of things that we were tracking and hoping to get done. And then obviously we went into the safer at home period of time, and really we pivoted almost exclusively, working from our homes, to interpret the order, to get out information as soon as we can. I have to give a lot of credit and thanks to our outside legal counsel, Robert Proctor, from the Axley Law Firm in Madison. He helped us with a lot of that information, and then we were getting that out to members as soon as possible. We actually also shared a lot of that information initially. We also sent to our non-member list as well. We just thought, we can show this is important information to get to our members, but for some of this, we're in such uncharted times that we really need to get the information to even our non-members, hopefully showing non-members kind of what we do, and getting that information out as quickly as possible. So, we received a lot of nice notes from members and local associations across the state. It was interesting. It was kind of a two-part wave when we would do that. We would send out the information. And for construction, I mean, we were blessed, and I have to thank the Evers administration for recognizing construction as an essential business. Largely, our contractor members were able to adjust and continue working through that time. But there was a lot of gray areas within that. Obviously for a builder, for a remodeler, for the most part, those were pretty clear-cut signs that you could continue to work. But we ran into some interpretations. Landscaping was one that came to mind, where initially we thought they would be able to operate. Then there was some guidance saying that they couldn't, and then was kind of ended up being somewhere in the middle after a couple weeks conversation, both on the state level and then some guidance that came from the federal level as well. So, I wish that we wouldn't have gone through that, obviously, but in some kind of strange ways, it was kind of a new challenge, especially working from my dining room, not in my office, to get that information out. But I think, largely we've received notice from the members that they were thankful. And I think it was, for me being kind of the, government affairs is kind of where I've come from and really have a passion for. It was really one of those examples of somebody that may not have fully recognized the value of government affairs. When we were getting that information out, I think that for people that might not have been that into that topic, I think they really saw, this is why you join a builders association, to get this type of information, to get it quickly, have the ability to ask follow-up questions. So I think, from a standpoint of showing value, I think that was, one that I think met the challenge and showed not only our members, but hopefully some non-members, and we're able to gain some members in the future by showing them, kind of the ropes on a very difficult and challenging time.
And there is definitely value for any one individual that tries to get answers from government or deal with government. And I think Wisconsin is really decent and better than most states. But one person getting an answer is difficult. But a group of people or someone who knows the people in government asking a question for multiple people, you're getting such better answers, more thoughtful answers, and quicker response. And I think it works better having someone facilitate, like yourself or your organization.
Sure.
For government, I mean, because Wisconsin wants to get out the information, and they want, contrary to what some people believe, our state officials want people to know solidly this is what you need to do and this is how you do it. And sometimes they struggle with getting the information out there. So organizations like yours really help to push that information out and educate people and provide a resource. So yeah, hugely important.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask about that a little bit. What was the housing industry like prior to COVID, like, January, February, or the end of last year? And then how did the shutdown impact it? I know contractors were generally able to continue working, but can you kind of talk to us about how the housing industry has been affected, affected, Freudian slip, by
Yeah,
the
exactly.
pandemic?
Right. I think things were going very well, fourth quarter of 2019 and then into the first quarter of 2020. I made a habit when I talk to members throughout the state, kind of asking them how business is going. That was a real scary question to ask, 10 years ago. And I stopped kind of asking it for a while because I knew that the answer was not going to be a positive one. But I think, by and large, and this wasn't just, Dane County or St. Croix County or Brown County, it got to be, having those conversations with, builders and suppliers throughout the state, how are things going? Then, and, even during the shutdown and now, it's really been the same answer. And there's been challenges along the way, but it's really been, we're busy, we're seeing new leads come in. some people have booked out, a year in advance of where they are. So it's been, by and large, I mean, we've run into some challenges along the way. Lumber prices, certainly, those increases have not been helpful. And I have to give, Holly, like you said, as far as giving credit to, our folks in government, I give a lot of credit. Early on, we had asked the Department of Safety and Professional Services Secretary designee to put out notice to inspectors, to try to encourage them to be flexible when they're doing inspections. Not to say don't do inspections, but to use technology when it was appropriate. And they put out a press release basically saying just that, in March, I think, mid-March, they kind of put that notice out. And I was expecting once the order went out that the next big thing that we'd have to deal with throughout the state was going to be, people not getting inspections and then being able to have folks move into their homes. But really, there was a couple of hiccups here and there. But by and large, the volume and the way the process for getting things inspected, approved, and getting people moved into their, families moved into their new homes. Really, I got to give a lot of credit. It was really pretty seamless in a very, very challenging time when, people were working remotely or working from their homes. So that has been, a big kudos to those folks that work in that industry, because I heard far fewer folks calling me about problems with that. So I think if we can hold on to kind of the current increase and the current market here that we've had into 2020, housing starts have been up. I mean, we just released last week the latest housing starts, which we get now. Municipalities are required to get that information into the Department of Safety and Professional Services. So up 22% from Q3 as opposed to Q2 of this year. And if you look from January to September of 19, there were just over 7,800 permits issued. That same time period in 2020, just under 9,000 permits. So roughly about a 13% increase January to September. So, all those signs are pointing to a continuing strong housing market. And if, the current news on the possibility of a 90% effective vaccine come to be true, I think that sets up for, a really, really strong spring of 2021 for the housing industry.
I was just going to say that with the news yesterday about the vaccine. And I know it's not instant or overnight. They got to finish finalizing, approving it, and then, distributing. And then I think it takes like a month for it to take effect once you get the shot. But I think the attitude towards it is, hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's sooner than we originally thought. So I think that's going to be really great news for our economy.
Absolutely.
So the other thing that I've talked a lot about, and I didn't talk to you about this yesterday, but there's the sales side of it, which has looked fairly strong all along. But then there is the supply side of things. And I know there's been a few hiccups. We talked about lumber, supply and demand there. But otherwise, I've seen some of the smaller contractors adjusting instead of not having much stock on hand. They're stocking up a little to ensure when people call and need things, they have it on hand. Are you seeing anything with that?
Yeah, I think that has been a good adjustment. If you were, trying to run fairly lean, I think, if you see housing start data that we see and you just are, the phone is continuing to ring, I think there's probably a greater appetite for maybe stocking up on some supplies that you may not have done. I mean, and some of that too, I think people were obviously, the downturn that we faced a few years ago, people were reluctant to have increased carrying costs, but I think adjusting and buying some materials when you had the opportunity, even if you had to hold them for a little while. And I think, obviously we have a number of members who are supplier members and work for lumber yards and different components that go into a home. And I think they've, been working very hard to try to get as many materials into our state as possible. So I think that, I know that our national association on the lumber side, legislatively, that's a tricky one to pass a bill and correct. I think there's been a lot of conversations on the national side with trying to get everybody at the table that deals with lumber, the suppliers, the producers, to see if there's anything that can be done to increase supply to hopefully bring that price down. I mean, obviously we have a tariff situation that if it will be interesting to see how that Canadian softwood lumber tariff is treated with a President Biden as opposed to a President Trump. I don't know off the top of my head if he's on record of commenting on that tariff, but if that were to go away, that could seemingly also bring down that price of lumber, which, if that were done in early 2021 and lumber prices were able to, decrease a little bit more, that obviously would be good news for those looking to build or remodel in the early part of 2021.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into, so we have the effect of the pandemic, and then the pandemic's effect on other nations where we may be getting electronics or other things and the supplies there and logistics of that. But then we just had our elections, and I know everything isn't finalized, but we know state-wise where we're at, right? And we talked about this yesterday, but where do you see things? I mean, my first question was to you about what do you think with the impact on our economy this year and tax revenue? Did you think there was going to be significant appetite for increasing taxes and fees, or what do you think about how things are going to go forward?
Sure. And it's interesting, there was a lot of conversation and a lot of polling done, September, October leading up to the election. And, there was a lot, there's always a lot every year. It seems to go up exponentially, the amount of dollars that are spent on not only federal races, but even, you would have never believed that there would be, $1 million plus spent on a state assembly race. And now that's kind of commonplace. And you have state Senate races that are spending what congressional races in this state used to spend. So it's just been an explosion of candidates raising more dollars, outside third-party groups raising more dollars. And we saw, the Democrats did a really, really good job of raising dollars. They had a effort here, stop the veto, to make sure that Republicans didn't get to a veto-proof majority in the Senate and in the Assembly. So they were able to capitalize on that and raise a lot of dollars, both in-state and even more so from out of state. So really, we were kind of racing for the possibility of 6 to maybe even on a good night 10 seats from what folks were saying that could flip in the state assembly from Republicans to Democrats. At the end of the day, there were only 2 seats, one up in the North Shore Milwaukee area, and then one out in Waukesha County where Republican incumbents were not reelected. There was actually a seat, a Democrat seat up in the northwestern part of the state, Superior area, that was very, very close, where Republicans almost picked up a seat there. So at the end of the day in the assembly, after millions and millions of dollars, you only saw a 2-seat change. So really not the cataclysmic move that some people had said may be happening. And then in the state Senate, you had 2 open seats that were controlled by Democrats in the La Crosse area and the Green Bay area, and then a seat up in St. Croix County that had been traditionally held by Republicans since 2000, and that was lost in a special election. And Republicans took 2 of those 3 seats, so they actually increased their majority from 19 to 21. Falling just one vote short of that supermajority. And then the La Crosse seat was the 3rd seat, and that was extremely close in the end. So really, from a standpoint of the mechanics of the Senate and the Assembly, hasn't really changed that much, and Republicans continue to have large majorities there. Obviously, they're going to have to work with the one bill every 2 years that has to get done, the state budget, and that's going to be the biggest order of business in 2021. Governor will introduce that and then have to get through a Republican-controlled Assembly and Senate. And with having, I think less revenue, maybe not as bad as people had thought, and maybe, I like to think, and I think so many economists would agree that, housing can lead you out of a recession and help bring tax revenue in. And I think we're seeing some of that. Were it not for a strong housing economy, I don't think the state's numbers would be looking as good as they are. But if our industry can continue to be strong, maybe it's not going to be as devastating as we once thought. But regardless, I think there are some folks that, transportation is an issue that's been talked about a lot, and there's some that argue, some Republicans and Democrats argue, that we should be raising the gas tax for more revenue for roads. There's been a reluctance to do that, especially with a core member of group in the state Senate. So I think the debate on the state budget is going to be very interesting to watch. I think 2 years ago, they were able to work through differences and pass a budget on time. As of right now, I would be very surprised if by next June 1st or July 1st, there's a state budget that's passed and signed, sealed, and delivered. I think we might have a little bit more painful process to get a deal done on the state budget. So, the first thing that'll come out is the governor introducing his version, and then you're going to have a lot of work done on the Joint Finance Committee to have that committee put their mark on it and then pass both houses. So it's going to be a very, very interesting budget session here to start off the session in 2021.
That seems like an oxymoron, an interesting budget session. Okay. Yeah, I just I'm so apprehensive because the revenue for the state has been down so much this year, and I guess it's less than they expected the impact to be, but it just makes me nervous of, what cuts they're going to make. I mean, cuts can be good, and I'm sure there's places to be cut, but, I just am not sure where, like you said, it's going to be interesting to see what they come up with and how they work together.
Yeah, I mean, and it'll be interesting also, I think one of the credits of the past, decade since 2011 was, before that time, very little dollars were put into the state rainy day fund. And I think, I don't have the exact amount, but it's a pretty substantial amount of money that's been set aside there. Is a global pandemic the time, and coming out of that, is that sufficient time to use some of those dollars? Does the governor start right from the start saying that he wants to use, a portion of that to help balance the budget, or does he keep that in his back pocket? I mean, the chess game that will go on, again, for people that watch this stuff like you and I, will be fascinating to see of, what, triggers are pulled, whether it's using the rainy day funds or using some kind of tax increase to help balance the budget, and when those come into play will be very interesting.
All right. So what do you think? I know we said the future looks pretty good for family housing and residential housing. One of the things I asked you yesterday is, last week I was talking more commercial focused changes that you expect, design changes as a result of the pandemic. And do you see any big changes or new technology or anything interesting that came about as a result
Yeah,
of?
I've seen some press articles that have gotten into that, Wall Street Journal articles, and some from NAHB. I think that there is going to be some, maybe not major overhauls, but, flexible space that you can use for office space when you need it. I think of myself in a house that was built in 1988 with a dining room that looks very nice, but truth be told, gets used in Thanksgiving and Christmas. But I was using that as my home office. And, if I were to design a home to move into tomorrow, it probably may still have a smaller dining room, but it would also have a space that would be flexible, that could be used for, and maybe, closed off to the rest of the house to use for Zoom calls and just, things that we didn't necessarily have in the past, that I think is going to become more prevalent as we move out of the pandemic. I think, the number of meetings that are going to done via Zoom, I think it's going to, maybe not be as many has been over this last 6 months, but certainly that's going to be a term that I don't even know if I knew that term before January 1st, maybe a little bit, but not that that much, and now kind of become an expert on the technology. So I think some of those subtle design things you're going to start to see. Who knows? Maybe even as our local associations hopefully get back to more normal looking parade of homes, and people are walking through homes in June, July, and August of 2021. You might even be seeing some of those subtle changes in those homes across the state, with that flex workspace and being able to close off, for sound and things like that. So I think it's a great opportunity, for those that are marketing and have an ability to kind of quickly change their plans to adapt to that. It might help some, builder members get a little bit more exposure and the ability to market that they have, new floor plans that include some of that flex space that can be used for a home office.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I think as of yesterday, I'm officially looking forward to 2021.
Right. Yeah. Those headlines. Yeah. I mean, and that's certainly better than, new vaccine tests at 30%. That would be kind of a bummer. But if it's, and I think they probably triple and quadruple checked their data because they didn't want to put out information that seemed too good to be true. But if that holds to be anywhere close, that certainly there hasn't been a lot of the light at the end of the tunnel, especially over the last couple of months, and that certainly is good news.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and for joining us today. I appreciate it. I hope you come back in the future.
Absolutely, would love to. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Next week, we'll be speaking to two gentlemen from Avalara, Scott Peterson and Chad Paulson. Scott Peterson's the government liaison for Avalara, and in fact, Scott's former position was the executive director of the Streamlined Sales Tax Governing Board, which then Craig Johnson took over for him. Chad Paulson, he has a similar background as I do. He's my counterpart. He worked for the Minnesota Department of Revenue prior to working for Avalara. And we're going to be talking about certified service providers. That's a multi-state tax issue and something that's available to everyone who does work in some of the streamlined states. So it's good for you to hear about that and learn more about that. And for those of you interested in multi-state tax issues, Craig Johnson, the executive director of the Streamlined Sales Tax Governing Board, will be returning to my show on December 15th, and he's expected to share some news with us, so don't miss that. And don't miss the interview with Representative John Mako on November 24th, and we're going to talk about the future of sales tax law, moving towards simplification of the tax law, and what he sees going forward with that. To rewatch this episode or to view previous episodes of 10 on Tuesdays, go to salesandincomeTax.com. Check out my 10 on Tuesdays channel. I will see all of you next week. Thanks for joining us today. Have a good week.